This is the Big Fish Cares Podcast. Big Fish Cares Podcast. And here's your host, Benny Fisher.
I'm with a fellow entrepreneur and Pittsburgh business mogul. I like that word mogul. I've been using it a lot. I'm here with my friend today, Brian Hess from the Pittsburgh Pavement Company? Pittsburgh Pavement Group.
The Pavement Group.
Just the Pavement Group.
Yep.
The Pavement Group. That's how this guy doesn't want to be just localized to Pittsburgh. He's national. Brian, tell us about that journey of how you got into paving. Because like people ask me how I got into roofing, so there's got to be a cool story because you don't look like your typical paver.
Yeah, there is a cool story. So I spent most of my young adult life in corporate America. So I was working in technology and kind of worked my way through the ranks and got into this program where I was going to be promoted. And most of the time when you're working for a corporation in Pittsburgh and you want to get promoted, that involves relocation because nobody leaves Pittsburgh, right? So if you want to move up the ranks in a corporation, you got to relocate. And so I had a couple options of where to relocate. One was to California and the other one was to South Florida. I chose to go to South Florida in October of 2010. And the very first appointment that I ran was with a customer that was having some troubles. And halfway through the meeting, I figure out that this dude is originally from Pittsburgh and he ran a paving company in Miami, Florida. And at the end of the meeting, he says, son, you should quit your job and come work for me. And I was like, man, you got to be out of your mind, dude. I'm in the middle of a pretty bad neighborhood in Miami. You know, I had a suit and tie job going to a corner office every day that overlooked the Miami airport and another office in Boca. And I'm like, I don't know about this whole paving thing. And that Friday night, he invited me to dinner at his house. He's like, well, man, if you won't take my invite for dinner, or if you won't take my invite to have a job here, then will you take an invite to my house for dinner Friday night? I'm like, shit, man, I'm eating, microwave dinners and going out to eat every night. I'll go have a warm meal with a fellow Pittsburgher. No problem. And as I was driving to his house in Coral Gables, I was like, damn, man, these are pretty nice houses. This doesn't look like the neighborhood that I was hanging out in the office, And 1 year later to the day, I quit my job in corporate America and jumped into private business and started working for that paving company.
So what were you doing in corporate America? Like what kind of jobs? Were you like a sales job? Like
sales. I was the director of sales for Verizon.
Like
so
Verizon,
I was literally
like
selling. I was selling cell phones and iPads and those kinds of things. My teams were selling cell phones and iPads to small businesses, primarily. In that job, when you manage a small business team at Verizon, the biggest customer base in small business is construction.
Yeah, well, I think at my company, we probably have 26 cell phones and 22 mobile devices. And yeah, so we're probably already over 50 lines. I don't even know. Yep. And I'm glad I don't see that bill anymore. That gets you nervous, So it's interesting that you worked at Verizon because I worked at Verizon Wireless. I don't know if I ever told you this. I did a stint where I was at the mall kiosk, like selling, doing what I do is like selling direct to the homeowner.
Dude, I could totally see that.
Yeah, and I loved it because it was like I got to put on my own little show. This is back in 2005. So this is before iPhones. This is kind of like when phones, they were trying to push smartphones like the Motorola Q and, the flip phones were kind of out of date now. They had the keyboards, the LG ones with full texting keyboards.
I remember it was the bar phone and then it flipped open.
Yeah. Well, not every single person though had a cell phone. So we were still trying to target the older demographic. We're trying to get them to buy cell phones to begin with. We were trying to take some of the younger guys and convert them to BlackBerries. And then I also remember there was always a contest on who could sell the most accessories with every new phone purchase. So you could sell some cords, some charging things, like a case. And I was always trying to hit all the contests and all that stuff. But so it's similar. And then, sooner or later, then my uncle called me up and said, hey, come and help me with some sales and marketing in my roofing company. And it sounds like this guy invested a year into the relationship. You told him no. You basically said, beat it. I got the best job ever at Verizon, man. This is what mom and dad told me to go to college for. And so what was that journey like for that year? I mean, he obviously did not stop trying to pursue you. That relationship pretty much, it seems to me like was the big catalyst. How many different touch points did he give you throughout that year?
Oh, dude, Lori and I went to dinner with him and his wife at so many restaurants in Fort Lauderdale and Miami over that year, and got to know him and his wife. And it was a long courting process, man. And it kind of ended with sitting at dinner one night. He said, "Listen, man, if I had a son like you, I wouldn't have any of the challenges that I have in business. Tell me what it's going to take. You name it, and I'll do it. Just come work for me."
That easy. So relationships, that was the relationship currency. I know you talk about that.
And by the way, at that dinner, we never discussed money. We never finalized any kind of financial deal or anything. It was just, I was bought into what he was selling. Right. And, and I looked at the vision of what my life could be, outside of corporate America, more into a private business scenario. And that was always, from the time I was a little boy, kind of the direction that I always wanted to go. But I grew up in a family, my dad was a steel worker. My mom stayed at home. And so I grew up in an environment where, working for people was more the norm, right? Going out and being an entrepreneur was not something that I knew anybody that did, right? I had an uncle that was in construction. He was an entrepreneur. And that was the closest thing that I knew to it. But I always, from the time I was very young, man, told stories about what I was going to do, what I was going to own, what businesses I was going to have. And I was 38 years old before that became a reality. So
what was the challenge? Like, first of all, I mean, I think it's forward thinking for you to even dream that you could have your own business. Cause I never could figure out how that worked because I always saw big corporations. My stepdad worked at a steel mill. My mom worked at a hospital. Those are big companies, right? They employ thousands and thousands of people. And for like the average, person, that seems impossible, right? And I didn't realize what small business was until I actually started working for my uncle in a small business because I only ever worked at those big corporations. So that's when it became a reality for me. But like, what was it like for little Brian Hess? How did you figure out how to get there? Like, because you went to college, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I didn't finish, but I went to college. Yeah.
Okay. And then you went out and got the big corporate job, right? Like,
yep.
So did you ever try any small businesses? Like, was there any side hustles? Was there anything that you did you have a lemonade stand when you were in high school? Tell us some of the.
No, man, I was always talking to people. So sales was kind of a natural knack for me, but, from the standpoint of experiencing small business, it wasn't really, I worked with a lot of them because of my role at Verizon, but it wasn't until 2011 that I really, got close to a small business and saw how it operated. And as I got into this business and I started looking, I'm like, man, this is not as complicated as what I thought, right? Like you think like, man, who are these people that start businesses and what do they have that I don't have, right? There's got to be something that I'm missing. And I think I say this often. I think for a lot of people, man, just the idea of how you even register and start a business is so daunting that people don't do it. Like, how would I do that? Like, man, it's simple. You either go to LegalZoom.com or you call an attorney and tell them what you want to name your business and you register one. Congratulations, you're a business owner, right?
Yeah.
But, once you get close to it, you figure out that it's not all that complicated. I did a podcast interview last week and somebody asked me, can anybody be an entrepreneur? And I said the answer is no. Not everybody can. Everybody has the ability to go and register a business, but can everybody be an entrepreneur? And I believe that's what makes the world go round, is having different people, different views, different motivations, different thoughts. I think a lot of people would do very well as an entrepreneur, somebody that's working for an entrepreneur in a small business, because there's different roles, right? There's the person that's perfect for the corporate setting. There's the person that is honestly unemployable at this point, probably like the both of us.
Oh, yeah. Sign me up. I am unemployable.
Yeah, we're not going to be employed by somebody at this point. And then, there's the person that, kind of fits in that small business model where there's a lot more wiggle room. There's a lot more creativity. There's a lot less red tape in small business. And so that was what I noticed when I got into small business. I'm like, man, this is something I can get down with, because all the ideas that I had when I was in corporate America was kind of like, yeah, great idea, but it's probably not going to work here because, they don't, it's almost impossible to implement something. It has to go through so many different people and levels to get approval that most of the time nothing happens. And so when you get into small business and you can turn it on a dime and you can see explosive growth like we did, when I stepped into that business, we grew that business by $16 million in a couple of years, right? Just bam, overnight, right? It was a 40-year-old business and it, came close to doubling in size in 2 years. And, when you see that, you start to get excited saying like, man, it's not that difficult. Like, you got to find a problem that exists, figure out a solution to it, and then create a company that provides that solution. And that really is what entrepreneurship is. And it's what creates small businesses all over the country and all around the world.
Well, I think it's interesting because I was going to get ready to ask you a question similar to what the person asked you last week is, can anybody be an entrepreneur? I think I know the answer to it. I want you to dive a little bit deeper on there. Tell me what traits, if someone's listening right now that wants to go out and start their own business like me and you did, what traits do they need to have? How honest with themselves do they have to be? And then what traits, if they have, like they can't, like I want to be able to repel them and I also want to be able to attract them. So if you can do that at the same time, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think, I think that people really know, man. I think there's probably a gut feeling in most people that like they either have that itch that, for me, it was, I worked for, companies that were pretty solid companies, but there was always something missing, right? That I knew like, man, from a culture perspective or something, there was something that was missing. And so I think vision is the number one, right? Like you got to have a vision for something. Like what is it that you want? What is it that you want to do? And to be honest, I think the second part of that question is it can't really be motivated by money. It has to be motivated by purpose. It has to be activated by something other than money. Because the harsh reality of entrepreneurship is that most really good entrepreneurs would make more money being employed for the first handful of years, right? Like however long that is, you can shorten that cycle with knowledge and education and a lot of great mentorship. But the reality is you'd be higher paid as an employee for the first, handful of years. So vision is a big one. Vision, obviously purpose is the second one. I think you have to be just relentless, like determined, and nothing's going to stop you. And that's something that, you see a lot in entrepreneurs. Like we all get frightened. We all get scared. We all get intimidated by circumstances.
Come on, man.
Or things that happen.
We're all tough guys, man.
Yeah. But you got to be able to overcome those things. And so for a lot of people, fear is instilled in you at a young age, right? To detect fear and kind of run from it. And I don't know whether it's courage or stupidity, but you got to have one or the other to be able to take the jump and keep on going in the face of most of the time what are extremely uncertain or unlikely circumstances, right? It feels unlikely to win in a lot of cases in entrepreneurship. And if that's not something, to your point of detracting people, if that's not something that you deal with easily, or semi-easily, that you can overcome that in your life on a regular basis, entrepreneurship will be a serious test for you and a potential difficult thing to endure. Because I believe in that sense, people either know they have a high tolerance for pain or they don't, right? And if you don't have a high tolerance for discomfort, entrepreneurship is probably not a place that, is going to be easy for you.
Well, you said a lot of things that I could unpack. The first one I'm going to unpack there is courage or stupidity. Now, my take on that is I think early on it's stupidity. And then I think as you deal with the tolerance and the pain, then you become more courageous. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I say this one often too, man. Like, I think a lot of times in life you have to borrow somebody else's courage until you build it yourself, right? And a lot of times that is either the demonstration by somebody else. In my case, it was the people that I worked for in small business. that I was able to look and say, like, man, this guy has the courage. Like, why not me, right? And so it's kind of borrowing that courage to say, like, man, if this person can do this, so can I. But I do agree with you. You have to have a little bit of, kind of missing the risk, if you will, which could be construed as stupidity.
Yeah.
In a way, you have to look at the risk and almost look past it, or just be able to calculate that the reward is greater than the risk, right? And and that was always the case for me. It was like, man, my dad, when I started this business, I was standing in the entryway of the house that I live in currently in Cranberry, and my dad says, you got 3 kids, your wife stays at home with the kids. What if it doesn't work? What if this business doesn't work? And I remember it like it was yesterday. I said, well, Dad, what if it does? And that was, I would take that to the level of, lack of education, because I didn't, I looked right past all the risks, and I looked at the opportunity for what could be. And I think that's the basis of entrepreneurs, right? It's like, you have such a passion for believing that you can solve a problem better than somebody else can, that you look past those things that are probably harsh realities that a lot of people can't get past. And it doesn't make anybody better than somebody else. It just makes you different, right? The way that you think and the way that you act on things is different. And that's, to me, it's what I see in the most successful entrepreneurs, is that ability to blow right past some of those risks and understand that, if it works, the results are unbelievable.
It also has to be said too, most of the entrepreneurs like us, I will say, the ones that start from nothing and kind of come out of the woodwork per se, it's less risk because all they had was a job before anyway. And what my mom and dad would have told me, and I wouldn't have said, what if it does work? I would have said, well, I can always go back to the job. I mean, I can always, like, McDonald's will always employ Ben Fisher, and I will be running McDonald's one day. Like, there's no doubt about it. So like those jobs are always going to be around, right? Like, so for me, there was really not much financial risk. There wasn't a whole lot of, it wasn't like I was already Bill Gates and had $1 billion and I had to put up 750 million to like hope a business works. Right. So talk to me a little bit about like risk back then versus like risk now. Like if I said, hey, well, you put it all on the line and go start this, it's a little bit tougher, right?
Dude, it's funny you say that. I just said it yesterday. I posted, our buddy Rocco had posted something on his stories, and I reshared it. It says
Rocco Cuzza?
Yeah.
Love him, man. I was just texting him a little bit earlier about something.
He posted something that said, sometimes you have to risk it all for a dream that only you can see. And what I added to that is a picture of a lion. I added, already done it a few times and will continue to. Believe in yourself and the rest will take care of itself. And I really believe that, man. It's like, sometimes it is something that only you can see. And, for 38 years of my life, man, I thought about what it could be, over and over and over again. And I always thought, those moments when you're employed by somebody and you're frustrated and you think, man, I would do it this way, or, whatever the case is. The only way that you get to scratch that itch is to make the jump, right? And not look back. And so for me, I would, if it was the right situation, man, I would risk it all again. And I would, go on the journey. It's about aligning the idea, right? Does it actually solve a real problem? What we do at the Pavement Group is, it's very easy to see how we solve people's problems and how we, make life better for those people that we provide solutions to. Our customers have better lives that work with the Pavement Group. We make sure of it. That's our mission, right? And, from the standpoint of how people create businesses, that's what it comes down to. If you don't have that idea, then you shouldn't risk it all, right? But if you have that idea and for sure it's going to make people's lives better that do business with your company, as long as you put in the work, man, and you don't quit, what's the success rate? It's extremely high, right? You just have to be willing to put in the work, get the right advice, have the right mentors, have the right guidance, and have the best idea that can actually solve people's problems and make their lives better. And the rest takes care of itself.
You said one other thing too after the courage and stupidity that I wrote down, because I wanted the high tolerance for pain. So where do individuals get high tolerance for pain, or where did you get your high tolerance for pain? Like, were you just born with a high tolerance for pain? Did you have to develop high tolerance? Like, if that's one of the ingredients, how does somebody listening that wants to start their own business be like, well, I don't have a high tolerance for pain. Like, how do they go get it? Or like, where did yours come from?
Well, I'll tell you this, man, it's interesting. We're recording this the day after Father's Day, right? And, one of the things that I always say about my dad is that he was the perfect example of, what it takes to provide and sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it was built in, from the time I was a little boy, I was right next to my dad working in the yard, doing whatever he was doing, I was doing. And so, whether it was pouring concrete, we never paid anybody to do anything at the Hess house. And so that taught me from a young age what hard work looked like. And, one of the things that I shared yesterday, you look around the construction industry at, most of these businesses, arguably all of these businesses in construction started as a family business. And you look at those ones that last the test of time, second, third generation companies that are around, and most of their parents took them to work. Most of the adults took the kids to work. And there's a company, American Pavement, up in Danbury, Connecticut. They have the Raised on Blacktop brand, right? And so there was a video that came out yesterday, and the father said that from the time they were 3 years old, he took them to work because he wanted to teach them how to work. And it didn't matter if they were going to get into construction, get into his business, or they were going to go do something else. They would never lose that ability and knowledge of how to work. And I think that, that tolerance for pain comes from discomfort, right? If you seek easy things, your life will be difficult. And if you seek difficult things, life will get easier. And so the tolerance of pain, I don't believe anybody is born with. I think it's developed, and it's developed by doing hard things over and over and over again, doing those things that people think are impossible, just by every single day putting in the work and getting a little bit better and focusing on those things that, maybe aren't the easiest natural gifts for you, but yet you can acquire those skills at some level by just leaning into the stuff that's really hard.
Yeah, it's so true. And it is the day after Father's Day. So this kind of leads into this question with our own kids, right? We have small kids, both of us. And we're not the dads that worked in the steel mill. We didn't have to go outside and use shovels and we're paying contractors to do all of the work for us now, right? I know because you called me for a roof quote the other day. So how do we now, how do we shift that? Do we just make our kids write more sales quotes and do more sales training? What does that hard work look like with our generation? Well, how do we duplicate that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, man. I think about it all the time. And it was funny. I was telling this story to somebody last week. There was a day, my entryway in my house, there's this staircase in my office. When we opened this company, I worked out of the house. And my little guy, who's now 4, he was 2 at the time. He had this motorized police motorcycle, right? And he comes buzzing his little ass around the stairs, right? Power sliding this little motorcycle around. And I was like, man, this kid has no idea what it's, what difficult is like. It was what I thought. How do I get this little boy to understand, what it takes? And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. I still do. How do we actually teach them hard work? And I really believe this, and it's kind of that catch-22, because in entrepreneurship, I'm sure you get this question Ben, how do you do it, man? How do you raise a child and have the time to run your business? And how do you have the time to do that? And one of the things that I struggle with, and probably a lot of people listening, is being a parent is probably the most insecure position that I hold in life, right? Because no matter what you do, if you're at work, man, you wish you could spend more time with them. If you're spending more time with them, you feel like, what am I sacrificing, potentially that I could, provide for them or security or whatever it is. It's like you never balance in that regard. I don't believe you ever reach center, right? You're always one way or the other. But I do believe this, and I've come to this conclusion through many years of thoughts. My daughter will be 10 this year. Many years of thinking about this. I think that the example that we set by who we are, I remember being a little boy, man, and watching my dad work and watching him sacrifice. And, there were times that my dad wasn't able to be around, but I knew why, right? Like I knew that he was providing, and I knew the example that he was setting for me. And, today when somebody tells me, that I remind them of my father, it's the best compliment I could get, right? And so I believe that as fathers, the two of us, the example we set will make a difference in how you teach them to work. And not giving them everything, right? Providing for them. We all like to do nice things for our kids, but not giving it to them to the point that it harms them, making them understand the value of hard work and what it takes to get stuff. And I try to do it as often as possible, explaining to them what something costs, what sacrifice looks like, all that kind of stuff. But I do think it comes down to the example that we set as parents, and how we live will show them exactly how they should.
Wow. We could probably just replay that clip a couple times over and over again. That's really good. And I feel like we're always, I guess because we're always going to feel like we're struggling with it, it's probably a good thing. It's probably when we fall asleep and we're not aware is where I'm thinking that's the trouble, just because, I'm not going to make my kid go out and, dig me a ditch, next to my driveway because I just want him to go do busy work, because I can't wrap my head around that either. Because like I was the kid that when my parents would ask me to do something, I was like, isn't there a better way to do this? Because I'm thinking like, that's probably what made me the entrepreneur inside, right? Like, I was always telling my mom that like, there's got to be a better way to do this. I was always giving them financial advice too. And I was like 16, 15. And they always used to kept saying like, dude, you're not my financial advisor. Like go out and get a job and like, make your own money and then tell me what to do. It's like, so it's kind of one of those things. Well, talk to me about the relationship that you have. You mentioned your kids, your wife, I got to have dinner with you and your wife, which I thought was really awesome. Tell me about how you do all the work-life balance, being an entrepreneur, obviously, needing to spend the balance between work and family. How'd you meet Lori, and, how's that all balanced out?
So met Lori in July of 2010, 3 months before I moved to South Florida. So you can imagine that was quite an interesting scenario, meet somebody, fall in love. And then 3 months later, you're on a plane, moving to South Florida, right? And so she came down to visit, and then eventually moved down to South Florida. And, a couple of years later, we started having kids, got married, all that kind of stuff. And but when it comes to, the work-life balance conversation is always one that people want to know about, because I think it's that thing that we all feel like eludes all of us. Again, the same thing with kids, like, you never feel like you get it right. And I feel like, the best thing that you can do is be aware and give yourself grace. But for me, the thing that works is that I try to integrate all of it, So we have the Top Contractor School retreat this weekend at Heinz Field, and, my kids will be there. They know all the people in that group. They look forward to seeing them. And so I try to involve them as much as possible. But I also am a big advocate of just, be present where you are, man. Like, if you're on a call, if I'm doing this, I'm not doing 6 other things at the same time, because my time with you is valuable, or I wouldn't do it. Right. And, if you can be present where your feet are and like not be doing 6 other things, while you're at home, try your best not to be working. It doesn't mean never, right? That you're never going to answer an email or you're never going to answer a phone call. But just make it a rule, man. When you're hanging with your kids, be present. Don't be on your phone the whole time. And when you're at work, don't be on your phone texting people at home the whole time, right? And I think that, as you get that and you try to blend your life together as much as you can, my kids go to school right on the same street as where our office is, and so my wife swings in here from time to time. I message my wife, that I'm thinking about her throughout the day, but it's 30 seconds and done, right? It's not like I'm not messaging her all day long, because then I'm not present where my feet are. But, and that's, I believe, what makes you most productive at home and at work, right, is to, just focus and be where you are. And that eliminates a lot of that feeling of out of balance when it comes to work life, because if you're not present where you are, you always feel like you're in the wrong place.
Have you ever had any conversations? I mean, like, I don't know, at least for me, like, I know that, like, because, your partner, if they're not an entrepreneur or come from an entrepreneur mindset, so I found that it's really even hard, even like other family members, even my friends, sometimes, like, it's that aren't entrepreneurs, they kind of don't get that little weird quirk that we have inside of our brain. How do you respond to, like, when people, like, you feel like you're letting people down based on, like, oh, they don't have enough of you, they're not getting enough attention. And it's probably real, right? In their mind, it's real. In our mind, it's like, oh my gosh, I did this. Like, I'm also doing this. I'm trying to provide this. How does that conversation, how do you have a good, healthy conversation? And how do you keep moving forward to where that way, both relationships, your entrepreneurial relationship and then your family relationship, still stays strong?
Yeah, I think, dude, you just have to, communication is the key to everything, right? It's asking questions, listening to why they think what they think. Because a lot of times in somebody's criticism or observation, there might be some truth in that, right? That might actually help you, right? As opposed to taking the position of, people won't understand me because I'm an entrepreneur. And I think, everybody that is in our position has probably felt that at one time or another, right? You're in a room full of people and you feel like, you're the only one, right? Like, why am I so different than everybody else? But I think that, communication is the key to everything in life. Every challenge that we face, it's about embracing that conflict that people have. Hey, Benny, why are you not around anymore? Why can't you make wing night? Or why can't you go grab a beer? Or why can't you? And I think that when you genuinely express to them why, like the true reason why, like, this is what I'm working on. And, like, I'll take it back to, when we decided, my wife and I had the conversation about opening the business. I told her, I'm like, you have to be prepared, because this is going to take a massive amount of sacrifice, right? And it's not going to be easy. And the only way the sacrifice pays off is if you don't let up until it wins, right? And that's, when is that? Going back to what I said earlier, you could shorten the cycle by getting the right advice, the right mentorship, all that kind of stuff. But if you climb up the mountain and then you let your foot off the gas, you're going to slide down again. And so sometimes it's just about explaining that to people, because I think everybody actually understands what it takes to do what we do. But it's easy to avoid for them because it's not the life that they live. But if you're willing to embrace the conflict and just have a conversation, ask questions about why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, most of the time I find that people actually do understand. They just may not agree with it. And dude, it's not for everybody, right? One of my favorite quotes that I've ever heard is like, you have a choice in life. You either sacrifice to get what it is that you want, to build the life that you want, or what you want in that life becomes the sacrifice, right? You end up with something different than what you actually want. And so, and dude, everybody's individual choice is their own individual choice, right? It's like, not everybody wants to live this life. And by all means, I don't think everybody should. But I think the more you have those conversations, the more people understand you, and the more, frankly, you understand where they're coming from. But I think it's pretty common for people to think that we're crazy.
Oh, yeah. It's probably why we do what we do. What do you say to that employee out there that's working his job? It's a superstar employee. They're killing it. And all of a sudden, it pops into their head, man, I could do this. Like, what are the steps that they should take? Again, we were those employees, right? That we took those leaps, but now we're also the employer, right? Mm-hmm. That has some of these employees that are really awesome team members. How do you guide and how do you coach, and like, how do you help with that? Like, what's our responsibility as not only just business leaders, but entrepreneurs, but as friends as well?
Yeah, I think number one is that you have to talk to the person that you're working with, right? And if you have the right leader, I think there's a lot of solutions that can work both ways, right? They say you can't have your cake and eat it too. I disagree there. It just depends on the leader. The reason that I ended up opening my own business wasn't because that's what I genuinely wanted to do. Is because I didn't feel like I had any other options, right? Or I didn't feel comfortable enough going to the people that I was working for or whatnot. The culture wasn't open like that. And so I think that's the number one thing is, don't do it without exploring all of your options is my recommendation. However, if you feel like that's your only option, talk about that with whoever it is that you're working with and express that. And if that's the way you want to go, man, whoever you're working for should wish you the best. And, hopefully, you can maintain, there is such a thing as maintaining a great relationship and, having a competitor. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of our competitors, right? And, if my best employee, man, was just absolutely set on going and opening their own business, I'd try to talk through that with them and figure out a way for them to either be able to do that here or if not, I'd wish them the best and, hopefully create another healthy competitor in the market, right?
Yeah, I think that a lot of business owners, they either lead with fear and they don't want anybody to have any success, or I think what happens and what happened to us, he talked about vision early on, is our vision became bigger than our employer's vision. And then when that happens, when that doesn't fit, right, if your vision's you got a bigger vision for your life and for what you're doing than the guy you're working for does, that's when there can be conflict, right?
One of the most important things either of us has said this hour is, I say this almost every week on our call. Our job as a company is to have a vision and a dream big enough that every single person's dreams that work here can fit within inside of it comfortably. And if we do that, we continue to grow and we continue to provide opportunities that people can do whatever it is that they want to do here. They can grow to whatever level they want to grow to. They can earn as much income as they want to earn. It's just a matter of how do they navigate it? How do they get to the position that provides that for them? That's what it's all about. And you are 100% correct, man. When you start to feel like, man, I don't think I can actually accomplish here what it is that I want to do, that's when people start to get that idea of going out and doing it on their own. And sometimes I do feel like the business owner, the entrepreneur is not aware that people have, dreams this big. And by the time they might catch it, it's too late. Like this person has already created this new reality in their head. And so, they're better off to wish them the best and go create their own company, because trying to bring that back within sometimes doesn't work. So I think it's super important to understand the vision of those people on your team and the dreams of those people so that you can make sure that, your vision and your dream is big enough to have everybody's fit within it.
I think one of the things I've always been really hypersensitive on is because, I didn't ever have any bosses or managers or anybody that cared enough about my dreams, because no one ever asked. Not one time from the time I was 18 to the time I was 33 years old. No one asked what I had in store for myself or what my dreams were. And I think if they did, and they were actually serious and curious, we probably would have had those conversations, and we probably would have been able to come up with a plan to work together, because it's so lonely working by yourself. I know at the beginning of the call, you talked about, there's lots of entrepreneurs there. And sometimes I always wonder, man, I could have been the best entrepreneur ever, because I just wanted a team. And because I didn't get that, I had to go out and create my own team, which, there's that's a lot of heavy lifting. It's a lot harder. It's a lot more work, right? I don't know if I was cut out for that kind of work sometimes, because it's wow, I had to go out and build my own team. But yeah, just fitting into somebody else's team and being able to excel and be a superstar and be able to provide value, I think is a really important thing to be aware of. And I think in today's economy, we have even more opportunity to be able to culture that and cultivate that. You talked about culture a couple of different times, and I also heard you talk about Contractor School, which I know is something that you do, which is completely separate, right, from the Pavement Group, correct? Correct. So the Pavement Group is your main business, correct? Like that's the business that you started. Tell me real quick. I don't want to get too much of the details because just like roofing, paving is probably boring. But tell me, like, what do you do? What's the main business? Commercial, residential? You know, how many states are you in? Give us some information on that.
Yeah, commercial only. We do business in all 50 states. We've actually completed work in, I believe, 47 or 48 states over the last 4 years. We work with, you know, the larger brands in the country. Most of those places that you shop at or go to the gas station or bank at, those kinds of things, there's a high likelihood that we are doing business or have done business with those locations. Anybody that has hundreds or thousands of properties across the country is a great customer for us.
And how many employees do you have right now?
20.
20. Cool. And if somebody wanted more information, they could probably just go to your website. You're probably always, it sounds to me like you're that kind of guy that you're trying to grow, right? Create a bigger vision. You probably got opportunities there.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. Pavementgroup.com. At the bottom of the page, you'll see a careers link. By all means, go there, upload your resume, and let's chat.
That's awesome. And again, you're based out of Pittsburgh, but again, you work nationally, and I think you even have most of your employees are kind of like just in different spots too all over the country, right?
Yeah, we've got 3 different physical offices, so Boston, Pittsburgh, and just outside of Minneapolis, and then we've got people in, I think, 4 or 5 other states.
But what I'm really curious, what I'm trying to get to, is this contractor school, because that sounds kind of cool. So tell me how that kind of evolved, and tell me what that is, and give me some information about that.
Yeah, so I've kind of always been a teacher, man. Like, you know, always just enjoyed sharing the knowledge that people shared with me. And so as I got into construction, so I came from corporate America into the construction world, and the first thing that I noticed was like, holy shit, man, there is no training up in here, right? Like there's no idea of, you know, how to do things. The first day I walked into the company that I was working for, I got, you know, a computer, a legal pad, a pen, and a cell phone, and they said, good luck, bud, right? Like, you know, that was, I'm exaggerating a little, but not too much.
Not too much.
Yeah. And so as I was learning, I knew based on the scenario that I was in at that company that I was going to have to bring in other salespeople, you know, because I was kind of leading the sales team. And so I started documenting everything that I was learning. So everything that they taught me, I would type it into a Word document every day on my computer. And that turned into basically a training manual that I would hand to these new guys. And I recruited a bunch of guys from Verizon to come sell pavement, and they all crushed it, right? And so as we started being more and more successful, people started calling and asking, like, hey, how are you doing this? How are you taking these guys from, you know, not knowing anything about asphalt and concrete, and teaching them how to sell in this industry? And basically at the end of it, they would say, man, how do I get my hands on that book? And I'm like, I can't give you the book, man. Like that, you know, that's like the secret sauce, you know? But as I started to grow, and then as I kind of, you know, exited that company and went in my own direction, I started to realize the value of this information. And just like you guys, you know, we operate on a subcontractor model across the country. And so the idea was, man, the more contractors that I could help get better at their own local business, the better off that is for us, right? And so that's kind of how it started. And so I started with a sales mentorship program. That's what I knew the most. So sales, marketing, that kind of stuff. We'd talk a little bit about leadership, and then we did one for operations. I kind of partnered up with another person, and we taught them how to, you know, recruit people and train people and build a culture on a crew and things like that. And after those programs were over, that was the beginning of Top Contractor School, right? After those programs were over, there was an Instagram chat thread that lasted from the sales mentorship program for like a year. Like it went on forever. These guys just asking each other questions. And it basically came down to, they're like, you know, what's next? And I was like, there isn't anything next. Like, you know, I didn't have any plan.
I'm going to go out and pound the pavement. No pun intended.
Yeah. And so, long story short, I ended up looking into like what was going on with other educational companies. You know, what's out there, you know, what are people doing? And so we came up with kind of a, you know, 3 times a month, we would get together on Zoom calls, things like that. And so we created Top Contractor School Elite. And that was, you know, a community started to be formed, right, of these people that started to share information. And we taught leadership and marketing and sales and you name it, processes, finance. And so out of that group of people, as that thing started to grow significantly, there was a group of like, kind of high performing leaders in there, owners of companies that said like, hey man, this is great. Like, what if we created a group of like leaders only, like, where we could talk about, the important burning issues, right? Without the risk of like, it kind of being an open forum. And so again, I went back to the drawing board, started researching like, how are other people doing this? And so we came up with this idea of, an inner circle that, we have retreats twice a year. We get together in person. We have calls once a week. And it has really been one of the greatest joys of my life, man, to get to know these people and watch their businesses grow. And really, it's become like a big family. My kids look forward to seeing these people. And so Top Contractor School, man, we've got people who have multiplied their business by 4, 5, 6 times the size over the past, 3 years. And everybody in the group is winning, man, which feels incredible, right? Like there's not one person that's in that group that's having a bad year or, not growing exponentially. And so I believe in the power of community and the power that community has to push each other, to show each other what's possible is really special. And so that's really what Top Contractor School is all about.
Well, I watch a lot of your content, and if you also notice, I'm right next to the road. Did you hear that bicycle, that motorcycle?
Motorcycle?
Yeah, I got to figure out how to soundproof this room that I'm in my house. But anyway, it's always a fun fact. But what do you have more like? What do you enjoy doing? Like if you had to pick, like the world's going to end tomorrow. You're only allowed to do one company, right? Because I'm assuming Top Contractor School is almost like its own separate like entity at this point, right? Because I watch all your marketing that you do, and I want to get into marketing a little bit before we wrap up. Because to me, I think you do one of the best jobs I've ever seen of anybody that does like sales and business, being a CEO and a coach, and then also market yourself. Like it's tremendous. This guy's like omnipresent, and he does all the other stuff. So. But what do you like better, the Pavement Group or the Contractor School? I know what you're going to say. Well, it's like my children. I can't just pick one because they're different.
I think that to answer the question, easy for me is that I get to coach inside the Pavement Group, right? So like you kind of get the best of both worlds when you own a company. Like you can be a mentor. It's just to your own people. But I will answer the question kind of in a confusing manner to say like, the one thing I would never want to give up is mentoring people and coaching people. Right. And so it kind of does check both boxes, but that is what I'm most passionate about, is helping other people, educating other people, and watching the results of that. Right. It's fun to win yourself. But it's a lot of fun, man, to watch the ripple effect of that go throughout a lot of different people and to watch their lives change. Inside the Pavement Group, we've had a handful of people buy houses for the first time in their family's history. And there's not much that replaces that feeling. There's just something special about watching somebody's life change in front of you. It's a lot easier to watch and realize in somebody else's life than in your own.
Yeah, I remember a couple people now on my team, like getting their first house and being part of that, and just hearing it in the meetings, and like it's like I didn't realize what that feeling would be for like inside of me. Like it's like, oh, it's just a house. No, it's not just a house. Like it's like their house. Like they're proud of it. Like they're excited. I remember when I bought my first house. It was a year before I went to go on my own. So I'm assuming, when I was at that business, and my uncle was really excited that I got to buy a house because I was working for him. And it's just like that that's almost like a gift, right? Because you talked about it earlier. If it's just about the money, you'll eventually fail because, money comes and goes, right? But that feeling of like helping someone. So as an awesome sales, I'm sure you were awesome at sales, most of your career. When does that shift from being really good at a trade, like sales, for instance? Me and you both, I think we got where we were because we were good at sales. But then, like, when do we get all fatherly and grandfatherly and like, when does that overtake us? Like, because I sometimes do still miss the sales, but I really do love the impact, right? That like helping mold and shift and change lives does for me as well. When did that happen for you?
I think it comes with experience, you could say age, I guess too, but when you realize that you are literally only one person, no matter how good you are at sales, if you can invest that same knowledge and pass it along, for me, it was really a blurred line, man. Like I was kind of a player coach for a while, and I'm still involved in the sales of our company at some level. I go to a lot of meetings still. I try to stay out of the way unless I'm asked, because
can't help yourself. I know the feeling.
Yeah,
you can't help yourself.
You can actually do the wrong things for the right reasons by thinking that you're helping, but really, taking away somebody else's opportunity to shine. And so, that's something I'm really aware of at this point in my career. But I think, when you realize that the impact to actually build a corporation, to build a company, it can't be just you, and you realize that. And so you have to put the same energy that you put into doing it yourself. You have to put that much energy and more into coaching and mentoring other people on how to do it, because it takes a long time, man. It took you, how many years to learn sales? It took me the same amount of time. And so passing that along takes time too, right? And so, you have to have the time to mentor and teach, and really have the patience to allow people to find their own way and keep coming back for more and more information. And so I think it comes with age, probably comes with a little bit of success too, right? When you get to that point where you're comfortable enough to let your hands off the reins a little bit.
You don't have to sell every single job, like, because you got enough of a cushion to where, like, you don't got to go close that deal for Friday. You can let your guys go close it, so that way they can eat. You can just sit back. I know one of the things that I admire a lot about you, a lot of things I admire about you, is you do have the patience to teach, and I lack that sometimes. Most of the time, let's be honest, right? We're on an honest podcast. I lack the patience to be able to teach. I'm not comparing myself to Michael Jordan at all. So don't make that comparison. But when I would watch him on the court, he didn't have patience to, he said, just give me the ball. I'm going to go dunk it, right? And sometimes that's the way I feel inside. It's like, all right, just you shut up. I'll take care of the customer. I'll go, I'll deal with that, right? No matter what I'm doing, it's like, here, I'll just do it myself, right? That's that old Pittsburgh Midwest mentality, right? I'll just put it on my back and I'll just carry it, right? How did you come up? Were you always did you always have that teaching ability? Is that something you're born with, or did you have to learn that? Because I feel really guilty sometimes hanging out with you, thinking how patient you are and how good of a teacher you are. Where'd that come from?
I do think that some of that for me was natural. I don't remember working at, being a teacher that much, although now I try to hone those skills as much as possible. But to go back to your Jordan analogy, basketball and business are very different. In business, there's more than 5 people on the court. And to really build a big business, it's not 5 on 5. It's a lot on a lot.
He's understanding that now as an owner, I think.
Yeah. And
he hasn't had quite the same success.
And so understanding that, what it takes to be able to be successful in business is to have those patience, right? And to your point, I'm sure that he's learning that it's very different in the world of business than it is in basketball. You can be a dominant force when there's only, 5 people against you on the court.
You're 20% of the equation. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so I think it's very different. But yeah, the patience, man, I think that, as you have patience with people and you show grace and you give them the opportunity and you watch those people, there have been enough in my career that at one point I wasn't sure if they were going to win or not, that the patience, allowed that to happen. I think we need more of that in the world, and I wish in my career there were people that were more patient with me at times, right? Instead of, just kind of showing me and then, going on about their business or pushing me out of the way and doing it themselves. I think that we can all get there a lot faster if those people who are mentoring us actually have the patience to kind of show us the way and give us some grace when we fall down.
Grace. I love that word, grace. I also think too, with me and my company, I've been trying to, because I don't think it's I think I've actually learned a lot of patience, macro patience and micro patience. The teaching though is a skill though that is, I think that's one of those things where you either have a little bit of it and then you can get better at it, or if you don't have it, really got to find some people that have it and bring those into your organization. Right. And then to still where people can go get that. And I think I did that with, I hired my executive assistant that I hired, Mallory. She used to be a teacher. And I picked her. There was a lot of people that were good, qualified for the job. People probably more qualified to be an executive assistant. She was a school teacher and she was trying to get out of the school system. And I remember picking her because I'm not a teacher. And I'm like, man, I need teachers. I need to be surrounded by more teachers. Because I feel like that's what's going to help you scale an organization. That's what's going to be able to show that person, especially a borderline person that maybe doesn't have all the natural raw talent. And maybe because of our processes and our systems, they're not exactly perfect. So you need a teacher to kind of bridge the gap, to kind of get that person to a success level to where they feel good about themselves in their work environment. So I think that, becoming aware of who you are as a leader, who you are as your strengths and weaknesses, and then complimenting people around you and adding to your team, I think is a really good skill that I think you don't start out with, but I think you learn it in business because you take so many lumps. There's so much trial and error that goes on. But we're going to wrap this podcast up, but I want to talk a little bit about how I've met you. So I met you through our friend, Joe Hughes, who runs a company called Contractor Dynamics, who helps, coach contractors on how to take their marketing into their own hands. Super consistent on Facebook at posting content. And there's nobody that I met other than him until I met you. And again, you were friends with him and you were in the same town as me. And I didn't even know who you were because we just weren't in that same circle. Right. And then he connected with me. Once I became friends with you, like, I can't get you out of my feed, bro. Like, you are everywhere. Like, between you and Joe Hughes, I feel like it's just like Hess, Hughes, Hess, Hughes. I'm not doing enough content. And then I got Gary Vee, who I've always looked up to because, like, he was like the mecca of, content. So tell me how you do it, man. You're a CEO of a pavement contractor. You're leading this contractor school. And then while you're doing all that, you're documenting it and you're putting it on social. How do you do it all?
Yeah, I think it comes down to strategy, right? And it's one of the things that that we teach is how to do that efficiently. Because I think that, for a lot of people, they think, man, that would just take forever. And what I always say is, like, the learning curve is, it's going to take you a little bit more time when you first start doing it because, you got to get used to it. But all of that happens, man, in literally a handful of hours a month, where, you get, again, be present where your feet are, block off a couple of hours, have a lot of topics that you want to talk about. I also think that as you produce content, it gets easier to figure out what it is you want to talk about. Like for me, what I talk about is pretty consistent, right? It's family, business, faith, marketing, sales, leadership. There's a bunch of things that, are pretty common questions that I get or pretty common themes that I talk about. I think it's easier than people think, but it's getting over that hump that gets you comfortable in front of the camera. I don't do a lot of second takes, right? If I stutter or I, make a mistake or whatever, I just keep rolling, man, because time is everything, right? And I think that, when you produce content that's a lot more natural, where there are, it's not overproduced, that it's more relatable. People get a lot more courage from that in the first place. I would just say, for people that want to do it, you have to start, and you can't start by saying, I'm going to post content 7 days a week. You got to start by doing whatever it is that you can do consistently. If that's 1 time a week, 2 times a week that you're posting, a short 1-minute video, then let that be what it is. And as you do those and as you get the reps in, it gets easier to produce and edit that stuff and get it out. And when I first started, man, I did everything myself. And as that started to grow, then now obviously I have people helping me with the editing and things like that with it. But it doesn't have to be complicated either. That's, people just want to get to know you. And so the more authentic you are, the more you talk about things that are in your wheelhouse, the easier it is for you to talk about. And it's really just about time management, figuring out where you can squeeze in a couple of hours. You can find a video guy a lot of places these days, right? So you just got to find somebody, get them to help you out. The best advice I can give people is just start. You won't get there without starting. I have 500 something episodes of my podcast now. It all started with one, just like this, right? You have an idea, when you take action on it, it gets easier every single time that you do it. So, for those people who are out there thinking it's impossible, it's not. You just got to start.
Well, you have that's right. You have the podcast too. It's almost like a separate business, right? Almost. It's like kind of like a combination between like Top Contractor School and the Pavement Group. Kind of like, it's more about, what is it? It's called the Morning Perspective, right?
Perspective podcast. Yeah, we do Morning Perspective every morning at 8 a.m. Eastern, live on Facebook.
And how long? And you've been doing that? That's like almost daily, kind of like, right? I mean,
5 days a week. Yeah, this morning was like episode 520 or something like that.
And then just keep plugging along. Have you always been? You've been on your own for what, 4 years now? 5 years?
Just over 4 years. Yep.
Did you come out of the gate documenting on social media like that, or did that come like after like a year or so? Like, when did you become like Mr. Personality online?
We did invest into social media right out of the gate, but again, man, the first year, we documented stuff. So I was doing Facebook Lives and things like that, but nothing. Like if I go back through my Facebook, like the first year's, rough. It's like what you're posting, how you're posting it, what you're talking about, all those kinds of things, and it's always going to be that way. You're always going to look back and think like, damn, man, I wish I had those jobs back that I could document over again. I could do it a lot better now, right? But that's what it takes. It takes, just going out there and doing it and learning how to do it. And you get more and more comfortable with every single time that you turn the camera on.
There's the famous saying, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Which comes first, the sales or the marketing?
Sales. You got to sell stuff to pay for marketing. But
marketing doesn't always cost money though.
Yeah, I agree. But I think
marketing can just be your time of like, do you go out and knock the door and then close it? Or like, you know what I'm saying? Like what comes first?
Here's the question. If you were broke tomorrow and you had to make a living, would you start marketing or would you go try to close a deal?
How would you get the deal though?
Any way possible. That's sales.
All right. I like it. Well,
but marketing is super important. And make no mistake that the minute you can switch gears from sales to marketing, you should.
I love both so much. It's always hard for me to pick one that I love more. They're kind of like children as well. It's like, man, it's like I really love both. So here's 5 rapid fire questions that I ask every podcast guest. Pretend you're on an island. You're by yourself. Okay. Completely by yourself. You're allowed to take one book with you. What book do you take?
Beyond Positive Thinking, Dr. Robert Anthony.
I'm writing this down because that's the first one I've ever heard of. That one, Beyond Positive Thinking. All right. A movie. What movie do you take with you?
Trying to think of a long one. Top Gun is the first one that comes to mind because I just saw it last week.
The original?
No, well, I saw the new one, but it reminded me.
Which one would you?
I love the original.
So yeah, you would take the original because you can just watch it over and over again, right? You can get fired up. Gotcha. Yeah. All right, and then you're allowed to put a restaurant on this place that you're living at. What restaurant? Because I know you've been to a lot of places and all over the world too. So tell me, which one would you put there? Could you eat at every day?
Cafe Martiranos, Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Now, that's the same one as the one at the Rivers now, right? Same owner?
It is the same owner, yep.
Okay. Is it a similar menu?
Yep.
All right, cool. Yeah, I've been to the one in Atlantic City and in Vegas, and obviously the one at the Rivers, but that's cool. All right, so you are allowed to take one vacation and go to one place for 1 week. Where do you go?
Anguilla, British Virgin Islands.
Anguilla. This is why we have different guests on. This Brian Hess, he gives us different answers. See, this is nice. Now everyone's going to be researching Anguilla. What do you like about Anguilla versus like another place in the Caribbean?
Anything that I would do to describe it would not do it justice, man. You got to go to experience it. It's the only place in the world that has the most beautiful beaches that you can hang out on almost all by yourself.
You just go there and stay for a week, or did you do a cruise and like just kind of stop by? Just go there for a whole week. All right. All right, this is my favorite question. You're allowed to fly somebody in for 24 hours. Who do you want to spend 24 hours with?
Do they have to be alive?
Nope, one person. You can pick anybody on anybody that you can ever think of.
Charlie Munger.
Why is that?
I believe that he is a significant portion of the brains behind arguably the most successful business that's ever been created.
Leave it at that, folks. Brian Hess, thank you for your time today. How do people get a hold of you if they want more information either about the Pavement Group or the Top Contractor School?
Real Brian Hess on all social platforms. Easy to find me.
Now I have to ask, is there a fake Brian Hess out there?
No. No, but
not yet, right?
The actual handle Brian Hess was taken, so that was the best option.
I feel bad for the other Brian, the original Brian Hess that was on social media.
You just given it up, yeah.
You just went and passed them up. Well, listen, buddy, I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate our journey together. You're definitely someone that I always like to call when I feel like I get stuck, and it's always nice to be surrounded by people who don't only have all the answers, but somebody that can, at least give us some perspective. See what I did there?
No pun intended.
Thanks again, man.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you, man.
Thank you for listening to the Big Fish Cares podcast.